When the therapists said that she's self-harming because she's transgender and she's not being affirmed, and that if you want your child to be healthy and happy and not suicidal, you need to affirm her. I mean, that was kind of a no-brainer. If my child is going to kill herself, if I don't affirm her, I'm going to do whatever I have to save my child's life.
Eventually, I realized that I was dismissing evidence, the CAS report and the WPATH files. I needed to actually read them and listen to them. When I did, the whole house of cards basically came crashing down. I was always a kind of tomboyish kid. Most of my friends were boys. I went through borderline precocious puberty. I started developing breasts at 8 years old and my period at 9. In the 5th grade, I was sexually harassed and eventually it became physical by another student. That was a tough time. I started being seen as like a young lady at around 9 or 10 years old when I was very much developmentally still a child. I initially discovered transgenderism online through Instagram and Tumblr around 10 years old. I started being groomed by an adult on the internet. I initially started identifying as non-binary. I think the term that I used was demi-boy at 11 and a half. By 12, I was pretty cemented as I'm a trans boy. I was fully socially transitioned by like 12 and a half.
When Claire came out to the family, she had been already socially transitioning in her school, and I was not aware of that. I didn't see it coming. It was really overwhelming and confusing to me. I honestly just thought, this is just another phase.
My family were initially skeptical. They did their own research online and came across the studies that said that around 80% of children with gender distress desist by adulthood. They didn't want to affirm me in the beginning. But shortly before I turned 13, I started seeing a new therapist who really beat them down, made them feel very small. They didn't want to be hurting me, and that's what she said they would be doing. They were told, your child has a medical condition that only has one treatment. And they were asked, would you rather have a dead daughter or a living transgender son?
I mean, that was kind of a no-brainer. If my child is going to kill herself, if I don't affirm her, I'm going to do whatever I have to save my child's life.
Any parent would rather have a living child than a dead one. And it was framed as though it wasn't a choice, or I would very likely kill myself, and it would be their fault. And that was a lie. I was never suicidal before. In the 8th grade, I was introduced to the concept of the genderbread person through my sex ed course, and it's used as a way to explain the concept of gender identity theory, mostly to children. And that was shortly before I began the testosterone injections. I had been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. I had been described by multiple leading experts in the field in my area as a textbook trans boy. I started testosterone in November of 2018, a week after my 14th birthday. When they put me on testosterone, they also put me on my first SSRI, and that made me feel very emotionally flat. When my voice started dropping, and when I started getting body hair and growth in places, intimate places, I didn't really feel anything about it, because I wasn't really feeling anything at all. I did the This Is My Voice 1 month on testosterone, This Is My Voice 5 months on testosterone videos.
And this is my voice. 11 months on T. So that's pretty cool.
And every time I would watch them, I just kind of felt numb. I was feeling nothing. When I told them that, they basically just kept increasing my SSRI dose. By January of 2019, I had been approved for surgery. I had been binding my breasts since I was 11, and they were pretty significantly deformed. And I was having nerve pain and rib deformity and spinal pain. It was kind of framed as the logical next step. Like, you're having these issues from the binding, so let's just cut them off. I was pretty brainwashed at this point. I felt like this is what I needed.
Seeing her body language, the way that she was so uncomfortable with her unbound breasts, I think that was a turning point for me when I started to believe that this is something that is real and that the treatment that is being suggested, recommended, will help her to feel more comfortable in her own skin.
My initial consultation for the surgery was in January of 2019, and it was a single 15-minute appointment.
There was not a lot of communication between myself and the plastic surgeon's office where Claire had her double mastectomy. I was concerned about how serious of a surgery that we were going into, and the nurse definitely reassured me that because of her age, that this would be like, she'd basically just a week later be her regular self. It was not something to be concerned about.
We scheduled the surgery for the summer between my 8th and 9th grade years. School let out in May, and then June 11th, I had the surgery. I had my mastectomy at the American Institute for Plastic Surgery, and they do drains-free procedures. When I woke up from the double mastectomy, I was very numb and very foggy from the medications and the anesthesia that I was on. When they first took the ACE bandages and the post-op binder off, and I cried. And the people in the room with me thought that it was happy tears. But I don't know. I was very emotionally numb. When I started weaning off of the medications, I started to realize that nothing had really changed, that I was still just as uncomfortable with my body. And then my nipple grafts fell off. Between my 3-week and 3-month post-op appointments, and there were just open sores, open wounds on my chest, and pretty horrible bruising and numbness and pain. I called the surgeon's office and they didn't pick up, and I left a voicemail, and I told them that the grafts were black and flaking and that there was liquid coming out and it hurt. They did not tell me when I was consulting with them that drains-free procedures have a significantly higher risk of nipple graft rejection. I thought that if something was really wrong, if something unusual or dangerous was happening, they would call me back. They would schedule another appointment, but that never happened. And then at the 3-month post-op appointment, the surgeon was looking at me and he said, "Oh, your nipples didn't do very well." It was framed to me like, we're gonna do this between your 8th and 9th grade year so that you can go into high school and be a normal boy, so you can live a normal life. And I felt anything but normal. I felt freakish. When I realized that I had been misled to believe that it was my only option, that's sort of when I became disillusioned. That's when I decided to stop taking the testosterone. I basically never shared with my parents what I was going through. I didn't want to make them feel like they had done anything wrong.
Claire was always extremely private. A lot of the things that were going on with her, we really didn't know. I noticed that she was starting to present more feminine. I found breast forms in her bedroom, and I tried to have a conversation with Claire about, have you changed your mind? Was this a mistake? And she got very angry and defensive and said, I knew that you were going to say that, and that's why I didn't tell you. As she got older and she was able to open up to me and share with me what she was really experiencing at that time, what I realized is, I realized that she was trying to protect me by not telling me that she was detransitioning, because she didn't want me to have the regret that she had. She didn't want me to feel wrong for having supported her.
I cycled through a whole bunch of identities. I was a demi-boy again, and then I was agender, and then I was gender fluid, and then I was bigender, and then eventually I'm a girl. And I was always just a girl with trauma and with a hard relationship with her body.
She asked me if I would attend her pre-op appointment for reconstructive surgery. I was supportive. I held my feelings in and was like, of course I will, but I was so confused and definitely felt a lot of regret that I had supported her to make such an impactful decision at such a young age, because the narrative is that they don't change their mind.
It was infinitely harder to get breast reconstruction as an 18-year-old than it was to get a double mastectomy as a 14-year-old. When we were talking about my mastectomy, I didn't see the informed consent packet until the day of the surgery, and after we'd paid for it. But during my reconstruction, we went through it multiple times. We went through it at the consultation, we went through it at the follow-up, we went through it the day of the surgery. The reconstruction process, when you're coming from where I was coming from, is pretty long. I'm very lucky with the results that I have, but I can never get back what I lost. I'm likely still going to be able to be a mother. I will never be able to breastfeed or feel anything. Actually, I feel less than I did before the reconstruction. There's no sensation on the skin. And I do feel robbed. I feel like I was allowed to make that decision before I knew what I was losing. You tell a 14-year-old, you're never going to be able to have children, or you're never going to be able to nurse your children. And they're like, ew, babies, gross. Primarily, I blame the culture, the WPATH, and the medical governing bodies that decided that this was okay for children to make these decisions. But when I'm ruminating on it and thinking about it, I blame my surgeon. I think the primary motivation for him was money, and he didn't care if he was helping or harming. If the medical bodies in charge of this protocol were willing to course correct if they were willing to say, maybe we're hurting people, maybe this isn't right, I would probably feel differently, but they're not. They're seeing that they're hurting people. They're seeing that the evidence backing their actions is flawed and lacking, and they are digging their heels in and doubling down. And I just can't support that.
Something that I neglected to do was to recognize that you're the expert on your own child. If there are other people that are telling you something that does not feel right, that you don't understand and you have a lot of cognitive dissonance about what they're telling you about your child, talk to other people, get multiple perspectives, trust yourself and your instincts, because your children are children and you're the parent. Not every child that says that they are trans is trans. My daughter is a living example of that. So as hard as it is to go public, because I know that there are people that will accuse me of just being anti-trans or transphobic, that's not true. I want for parents to know about kids like Claire. I just think that it's important that stories like ours are heard.
There's no wrong way to be male or female. Nothing you can do can change the way that you were born. Your body changing is scary, but changing it in unnatural, synthetic ways, it is just as scary. You always think, going in, sure, there are these complications that can happen. There are some people who regret, but that will never be me. It can be you. It likely will be you.